I really want people to feel empowered to use their voice, whether it's on a stage, in a room, whatever it is. The idea that we would already shut down our voice before we even spoke words and got reactions is just really sad to me.
Hi, I'm Carol Podell, and this is She Takes the Lead. Hey, party people, it's Carol. How do you feel about public speaking? Like, what's your opinion about it? I love it. I mean, obviously I have a podcast, so obviously I like to speak in public, and I've always been someone who enjoys talking. I'm pretty social, although I think I'm what would be called an ambivert, which is like a introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert. The reason I ask is because today's guest is a public speaker and public speaking strategist. She helps public speakers become better and more articulate around presenting and really gives them that extra secret sauce that she has. Her name is Devin Sarno, and she has 15 years of experience. Devin combines her passion for live performance, improv, and comedy, which we went deep into, with a commitment to helping others find their voice. She also works with younger people. She has a background in drama and comedy and improv, and she knows how to captivate an audience and delivers a message that resonates. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Devin Sarno.
Hi, Devin. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here today. I can't wait to chat and drink some tea together.
Amazing. Cheers. Cheers to that. Although I like your mug more than mine by far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They're a gift. They were handmade, I think, in Tennessee. I feel bad.
Ooh.
I can't pitch the artisan because it was a gift.
All right. Well, you'll pitch the friend who gave you the gift, and the artisan energetically will have gotten something from it. So tell me a little about yourself. Introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners.
Sure. So I am a public speaking and presentation strategist and a keynote speaker. And what I do when I'm not doing that is I coach competitive speech and debate here in Denver, Colorado for the George Washington Speech and Debate Program. And I absolutely love it. I love working with teens. I spend every day with them. I travel all over the country with them, and they make me so happy. They're so wonderful. If you don't have teens in your life that you're investing in and talking to, I highly recommend it.
You don't hear that much, you know.
I know. I'm always so shocked by it because that's what people say. Ooh, you work with in high school. And I am so blessed to say, not only as a teacher, but as just a human being, that I actually love my job.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a statement in and of itself, but yeah.
And I mean, I'm working a lot of hours. Like I work all day in a classroom, and then some evenings I'm going to work after with specific kids. But then we have tournaments basically starting in September all the way through June, essentially every weekend.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not necessarily going every Saturday, but I would say 1 to 2 Saturdays a month I'm working. And then we travel to another part of the country about once a month on average. So
wow. That's a lot. And you have a family, right?
I do. I have a husband and 2 kids, 6 and 3. And that's a team effort.
That is a team effort. Yeah.
He's great. But he loves hanging out with the kids. You know, I married somebody who's like, his goal in life was to be a dad, and he's in his sweet spot right now. So he's super great. He hangs out with them. I go stay in a hotel in New York, San Francisco, Texas, somewhere, and hang out with a bunch of teens.
I mean, that sounds real. The hotel part certainly sounds really fun. I have to say, I do like teens when they're cool, but I don't know when. I'm not sure I would like all teens.
I don't even know if I would like all teens either, because these teens I get to know like so well and so closely with this type of environment. We're talking about real issues, and we're really discussing things. I have kids that I'm very close to now that have graduated and gone on. And when 2 of them graduated, I think they graduated in 2019, in their grad cards, I had added it up because they were very competitive and they really loved to travel. And we had stayed 72 nights together in a hotel over the whole career.
Wow. That is a lot of,
We get to know each other really well. It's a little bit different than like your English teacher that you had sophomore year. No, it's not quite the same.
So actually, that's a good question. When you're working with someone like that, I mean, obviously teenagers, it doesn't really matter the age. I would think like knowing them probably is a big deal in terms of how you're helping them to communicate, I would think.
Yeah, so true. Because I'm a big believer that you should be being yourself on stage. You should be being your authentic self. So while I'm trying to draw kids out of their shell, because I think a lot of times when you go on stage, you make your box and your personality this big. I'm here to open up that box, but I'm not here to transform it into like a replica of me or a replica of some other super competitive kid, because you'll never have fun. And really, at some point, you'll hit a ceiling and you won't be as competitive. So getting to know these kids and knowing their comedy styles, knowing their passions, knowing just the little idiosyncrasies about them allows me to then help them, especially if they're speech writing or maybe they're in an event that has a lot of humor in it, help them to become themselves on stage and not some version of somebody else. And then hopefully authentically be themselves more in life, right? Like you can be yourself on stage, and I'm here saying like, that's the person you should be. That's how you should act. That's what you should say. And then you win an award for it. What a amazing, resonating thing for a kid to realize like, oh, I should just be myself all the time.
Yeah. Like a confidence builder. Right.
Find that version of themselves that is true and authentic, but like awesome.
That's so cool. That's so cool. How did you start doing this?
Yeah, you don't fall into like speaking, debate, teaching every day. Yeah. Actually, I'm one of the rare ones in the community because speech and debate is kind of, I don't know whether I call it a hidden secret, but it is the largest academic activity in the United States. There's some stats and research out there that it's the number one extracurricular activity that colleges look for. At my school, it happens to be an honors level elective, and we're super blessed in that way. But at most schools, it's an after school activity. So it's a huge community, but it's kind of one of those insular ones that if you don't know about it, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
So most coaches did it in high school. Most coaches fell in love with it in high school and either knew they were going to coach or knew they were going to teach, and now they're coaching. I grew up doing theater. Like I came out of the womb looking for
theater geeks.
Right? Like I was like, there's center. And so I did that my whole life and didn't know that speech and debate, what it was. And then I got formally trained. College was theater, lived in LA for a while doing theater. And then when my life kind of directed me back to Denver, my goal in life was never to be famous or like a celebrity. My goal was always to use my degree without having to have a second job. So like I was hoping to someday make it in LA that I didn't have to be a bartender or a waitress or as something, that I could live on things that were acting as related or whatever, whether that be acting, directing, whatever. So when I came to Denver, I was seeking out opportunities and I was directing theater at the time and came across someone who saw something in me and said, no, you do theater? Yeah. You work with kids? Yeah. And so there is this side of speech and debate that kind of looks a lot like competitive acting. So that's where they saw the connection. So they put me in contact with the woman, Mary Rose Cohen, who runs our program, in late January of 2012. And I walked in the door and met a few kids, just a few kids. And I knew immediately that I was hooked. And I was volunteering at the time. I was just like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I just never walked back out. And now I've been there since then and paid now. And
that's fine.
I'm in love with the world of speech and debate and working with teens. But a few years ago, I realized I have been so kind of almost like echo chambering. I spent my whole life on stage with actors. I went to college with actors. And then I left LA, everybody in LA is performing in some way.
Yeah, they're all in show business mostly.
Yeah. And then I headed to Denver and started immediately with this super high level speech and debate program where kids are maybe coming to me at 14, scared to speak, but they're leaving at 18 powerhouses.
Wow.
And so in my mind, everybody gets this training somewhere because I really hadn't spent a lot of time with people, even though I heard that statistic, even though you always hear public speaking is the number one fear or number two fear or whatever. I really didn't know those people. And so I started to hear from more and more friends that were in the corporate world or different spaces how true that was. And so I realized adults need this too.
Yeah.
And I can offer that to them. And I really like doing it. And I like speaking. And so I branched out and I have my own company and I'm offering training to adults and I keynote speak for companies can bring me in for their employees and stuff because not everybody gets this education and they should.
For sure. For sure. And you coach adults also, like that's awesome. Do you do it online or does it have to be live?
Both. I mean, obviously being in person is just a wonderful space to be in and allows for a lot. But yeah, since the pandemic, I have coached online repeatedly. I mean, I taught speech and debate online for a year before. And then once we went to school and we were in person, we were still competing online for a year. So I am well versed in coaching public speaking through Zoom. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's very cool. So, and they're all like Devin Sarno is where we find you in all the ways.
Yeah,
and
on my LinkedIn and all my social media, it's Devin Sarno. My company is Parlay Communicators. But yeah, I just want to help kids, adults, whoever stand on stage and feel in their power. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it doesn't have to be a stage. It can be like inside a room, but wherever you have anxiety, speaking out and using your voice.
Yeah.
I want to help change that.
It's funny that you say that because I was also a theater kid. I was a performer. I was in a rock band when I was in my 20s. I was on the stage. I did TV and film, not a ton, but enough. Right. And then I was behind the camera for years, so certainly for 15 years. So certainly I shouldn't in any area have any kind of fear of that kind of thing. But I'll tell you, once I was sort of more in the corporate universe, whenever someone would find out I was a singer or in that environment, they'd be like, oh, can you sing something? Now, first of all, singing in a conference room is insane, or for me, is insane. But at the same time, I'm terrified of it. I'm a public speaker. Like I said, I've sung in front of tons and tons of people. I've done it my whole life. But if you put me just in a conference room with a bunch of people doing that, it's genuinely I get nervous and I'm like, this feels terrible. It doesn't feel anything like it should. Almost same with karaoke. Almost same with karaoke. Yeah.
I have held the lead in full-scale 3-hour musicals. And people were like, oh, will you karaoke? And I was like, no.
Very different. Very different.
Very different. And so I was like, do they have Sondheim? Because otherwise,
Right. No. I haven't rehearsed. I don't know the key. I haven't talked to the music. Right. Exactly.
Who's the accompanist? I can't. Do they know?
Right.
It?
Exactly.
I can't do it.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's just all different muscles. And I guess that was leading me to now that I've been, I transitioned from television production to corporate financial services. So it's a big jump. And I've actually coached C-suite leaders presenting their work, if they're speaking at an engagement, et cetera, or they're on a panel. I've actually coached that. But what I find is that they don't like it. These senior people who speak in front of a lot of people all the time in certain environments really do not like it. That's not why they're there. But they have this fear of public speaking. I mean, that's how many people have this fear of public speaking. Right. And now I have several friends, I guess, as I've kind of gone up that ladder that are in spaces that they're great communicators. They're great communicators, one-on-one, even 10-on-1, in a meeting. But when it's time to present an idea, it's very different. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about how you would talk through somebody who is a leader, but afraid that way?
It's so interesting you bring that up because I just, this past couple of months, I've been working with a CEO. In their space, they needed to get up and address at a town hall. So it was going to be the entire company. And I want to say at that point, the company, 600 people maybe. And some were going to be online and some in person. And it was supposed to be, I guess they do 2 town halls a year. This one is sort of wrapping up the year. It's the end of the fiscal season or whatever. And they're going to do it's supposed to be celebratory and a little bit of launching the next season, but still. And this CEO had brought me in specifically because it's not that they weren't capable of speaking on stage or not. super comfortable. They found some stages were more intimidating than others, but it was
Right.
because they knew that they needed to get up on stage and be celebratory and empowering.
Yes.
This event was going to be 2 days before the election, and the election outcomes would drastically shape the direction their company would go in,
Wow.
one way or the other.
Right.
They also were they have some relationship with the government of the state, and they were in deals with them. And while they were supposed to be celebrating a certain thing going through, it didn't go through as well as it should have. So then there was tension there. And then the biggest factor was in 3 weeks' time, they knew that they were going to have to lay off people.
Oh, wow.
And so this CEO was going to have to get up on stage and present to their business, their company, and try to uplift people. But what they didn't want to do was lie.
Yeah.
But of course, they can't get up there and just say all of that. You say,
Yeah.
be authentic, whatever. But there's time and place. You can't get up as the CEO and just say, well, hey guys, I'm so excited about this year. Just want to give you a heads up. We're going to lay half of you off, and
Yeah.
we're going to lay some of you off in a couple of weeks, but I didn't want to lie. So
Right. It's poor form in either direction, really.
it's poor form, and because it's entirely an inappropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
But they also didn't want to get up and make it sunshine, rainbows, and sparkles and have in 3 weeks people turn around and say, you hoodwinked us.
Right. Also poor form, right?
Yeah. And so they had a lot of anxiety about what should they say? How should they say it? And so we worked together to not only craft the address they were going to give that acknowledged things like the unknown situation of the country, but also the unknown situation of the company. But like, what will they do together to overcome these challenges, and how will they meet this? And there will be barriers, but together, like finding that right middle ground of not ignoring that there are obstacles coming,
Yes.
but not making them, the rest of the employees, sit in like just a state of fear for the rest of the day. And so after we crafted that as authentic as it possibly could without, being too revealing talk, we then worked through how that should sound and how that should come across. Because just because you mean it doesn't mean that you'll get up and say it exactly the way it should sound. That takes practice. And within that context, there was also like a personal story they were using. And that was the first time that they will have talked from the stage using their own personal life. And so that was a new challenge for them. So we worked together. So the biggest thing that I think is finding those moments where you can start to narrow in on what's really bothering you. Because I think for CEOs, you have so much going on. It's easy to just say, oh, it's anxiety about public speaking. But kind of, especially when you just said, like, they're fine in one-on-one, they're fine in a boardroom full of 10. What is the audience that you're speaking to? And what about that audience is giving you anxiety? Because is it that you're speaking to your employees and you needing to come across as a certain type of leader is weighing you down? Or is it that you're speaking to somebody completely outside your organization and the idea that you're not the authority in that space is weighing you down?
Right.
And then as you work through those conversations, then you can start to really actually get into improving what's happening for you in that moment. But first, you got to figure out first, what's actually giving you anxiety?
Oh, interesting. That is an interesting perspective on it. You really need to go deep into sort of their psyche, as well as not just the content of what they're saying as it is presented, but the content of what they're saying as the content as it's related to themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really easy to think that we are nervous because it's on stage and we've just called that stage fright and we've just given a big label. And I think that's fine.
Sure.
But when you want to overcome it,
yeah,
you got to figure out what you're actually afraid of before you ever. And usually it's judgment. Well, being judged as, what are you afraid to be judged as or for? And then you can start to solve for that.
Isn't that why? I mean, that's sort of, I think, a through line in most people's lives in general. A lot of people's lives certainly is like, how am I going to be judged for that? Like, whatever. You put yourself out into the world, or you put yourself out of your comfort zone of what you're doing. I mean, maybe it's just me, and that's my assumption is that everybody, but I feel pretty confident in saying like that it's judgment. Often there is always a component of like, I'm out of my comfort zone, and what is somebody going to say about that? Whether that's you don't belong here, you don't deserve this, who the hell do you think you are, to you don't know enough, I don't think you know enough, I should have had that job, I should have done. But it's always, there's a component of that a lot.
And I think it's all just another form of imposter syndrome, right?
Yes.
Because if you're scared you're being judged, it's usually that you're scared they're right.
Yes.
And so you're not scared, because I heard you say, I should have had that job. And so, yeah, it's like you get up on stage and you're worried that you're being judged because other people wanted that job. And you're fearful that you're proving them right.
That's right. That's right.
And so, imposter syndrome and stage fright, I think, go really hand in hand. They're good friends.
Yeah. It's funny. I haven't had this memory in ages. It was amazing. I was at the Eugene O'Neill Theater up in Connecticut years ago. I was singing jazz, and there was a woman there, beautiful singer, like really good. And I don't actually even remember what happened, but she was very confident and a great singer, but somewhere along the lines, like had a change of a relationship with the other people who were in the show, that also we were each other's audience a lot, or a large part of each other's audience a lot. And she'd made this very bold decision to sing a song that was outside of her type. And over that week or whatever, it had gotten so built up and so, I don't want to say toxic, because I'm not sure that was it, but it got so overblown in terms of she's going to overcome, and they're like, who the hell are you? And the relationship between that. And she started singing it, and I'd heard her sing it several times, and she was great. And she's a lovely person. I mean, that's the thing, but it just like landed here, and she didn't do it the way I know she could and had, from that embellishment that obviously I permeated for whatever reason. And then the like, well, it was the I'm going to prove you wrong as motivation, which I don't personally that doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for me either.
Yeah.
No. I know there are people who like really like can dig down deep, and like that's where they find their like fire, and I think the other thing about that is, within that idea that you have to prove you're wrong with the jazz singing and stuff, it becomes about the wrong thing then when you're performing. And that's when your body is going to start to betray you in that way, because you're not singing from this place of joy and release. And instead you were singing from a place emotionally that I can't quite identify, but like it was never going to be the same. And she probably could have sang it great had she never told anyone and just got up there and had
Exactly. And I think there is an element of like, you're giving it away. And once you stop giving it away, it's like, I had an act teacher used to say, don't steal their cry. Like if you're crying, cry. But if you're not crying, or something, emotion's not coming, if it has to come, then we need to discuss what's going on. But don't steal their cry. Because if you suddenly cry because you've kind of pushed something that has nothing to do with what you're doing, you've now completely taken them out of the experience that you've promised them. And it was very revelatory. And as we're talking about public speaking, I feel like that's very much, you really can tell, especially in a corporate environment, when somebody's telling you, like they're reading it, or they're telling you what you think you want to hear, as you said, and it changes the dynamic tremendously.
Yeah. I was with some women this week and we were talking about public speaking. All of them are very similar, top level in their careers, but their careers are not public speaking. And I was discussing with them some elements that they were going to give up. Very short. They were each going to get up and maybe speak for like 3 minutes. Not major keynotes, but it really doesn't matter how long you speak. And one piece of advice I offered them is, it's very similar to a work piece of advice that I think people hear all the time. The idea of this meeting could be an email.
Right.
Yeah. Think about that with public speaking. If you are not telling me how to feel using your tone and your language and your body and your face, it could have been an email.
Interesting.
And I think that's where most people don't really understand, because they'll spend all this time writing this beautiful language. And there are very intelligent people out there, and they craft these really thoughtful things, but then they stand up and they read it and they assume that you will hear the words and you will have the feelings that they had when they wrote it. And the truth is, we don't. We may have feelings, maybe, if we have connections with those words or thoughts, but a speaking event should be guiding us on how to feel. And then we can decide if we agree or disagree with that. That's all within our own power. We don't have to agree with everything that comes out of somebody's mouth. But that's what a public speaking should offer, is another element of understanding. That's why we vocalize it rather than just send an email.
Right. That's very powerful. And actually, that's a good lead to what I want to ask you, because I have some friends who are super eloquent and intelligent and quite successful in their own right that, are terrified of speaking. And I don't mean publicly speaking on a stage. I mean, they're introverted and they don't really like to go out and talk to people, but they have to, whether that's because their profession requires it or they're trying to change their profession and go out and frankly talk themselves up to do another profession, which is, who I deal with a lot are people who are like, I'm a stay-at-home mom and now I want to get back in the workforce, or I'm professionally, I'm not happy and I want to change, or I'm divorced and now I'm going to do something else. And they don't really know how to do it because they don't know how to authentically connect with someone they just met. And while I guess, quote unquote, selling,
yeah,
they're not selling, but it's hard to permeate that a lot of times because they don't have your piece, which is that you are there. So tell me a little bit about if in those kind of case situations, how would you handle it and advice you'd give them maybe?
Sure. So anecdotally, I work with engineers in the expert witness industry. So this is something new I've learned in the past couple of years, that expert witnesses, it takes a long time to be an expert witness. You got to spend a lot of time figuring out the cases and figuring out what happened. So there are firms, just like law firms, that host expert witnesses of, for example, in engineering, because it takes a long time to do all that math and all that science to come up with what happened.
Interesting.
I know, it's very interesting. I actually love working with them because I love so much.
Wow.
So I work with this one firm. It's called Explico, and they have brought me and my coworker that I work with on the speech and debate team in, and we work with their engineers because these men and women are so brilliant. And they are, some of them have PhDs, but they have spent their entire lives becoming brilliant at a very, I want to say, niche in the idea of this particular form of engineering. Most of them have many other areas of knowledge and are very vastly intelligent. But when you go to these schools and these post-grad programs for engineering, you are with your peers the whole time. So you are in this space where they only care about content.
Yeah.
Your professors, your peers, they'll sit there and all they want to hear about is the data, and all they want to hear about is what happened, the impact of whatever. And you can use a shorthand and they're not really paying attention to you. And so they're not learning how to sell it because they never had to.
Interesting. Right. Of course.
So what we come in and kind of open up to them is, one, I think there's a lot of empowerment there, because I think a lot of people forget when they get up in these moments, like you're saying, whether it be a stage or they're in a room and there's imposter syndrome and feeling, is you are the expert in the room. You are the authority, because I always work on you need to establish right away credibility, authority, and trust. And so most of the time when these people come in, they're already the authority. They have a PhD in this. They're credible, most likely, because they're going to bring a bunch of data and information to the table. So the part that they're missing right now is the trust. And we don't trust innately people who put up big walls. And what's crazy about that is it's backwards in our heads. We oftentimes think we need to be even more buttoned up and professional. We never can make a mistake. We don't want to let them see any part of our humanity or cracks, because then they'll think we're not the authority and we're not credible.
Right.
And so trust is such a key element because it actually is what makes you the most likely to get the sale, to get the buy-in, to get people to then respect your credibility and authority.
Mm.
Because throughout life, we have tons of people who are in positions of authority that we don't respect.
Right.
And there are tons of people who are probably credible, but we don't respect them and we certainly don't trust them.
Right. For sure.
So start to understand that if you can be yourself and not worry about little flubs, little ums in those situations, they actually will go away. And then my little like tips and tricks are do some research. So like if you are headed into an interview and you know who's interviewing you, kind of scan the company website, but also kind of see if they have social media out there or not or whatever for this purpose. It's not that you're stalking them. You're not going to come in and be like, hey, I looked at you on social media.
Of course.
It's not that. You're seeing what information this person is comfortable putting out in a public setting.
Oh, interesting.
So let's say they put out that they have a dog and they like to go to the mountains for the weekend and they went to this particular college, so they're super into that team. Now, no, they don't think talking about your pet, your alma mater, and where you like to vacation is super out there. They are comfortable with that being a public space. So those are topics that you could use as you introduce yourself to them to like start to make a connection. And especially if you like, I love going to the mountains, bring that up.
Yeah.
That's why is like, just do a little bit of research.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people have like a bio on their company website that has a couple little nuggets. And it will also cue to them, if it's their company bio, that you took the time to read it.
Yes, for sure.
But in most cases, it's more like, okay, it doesn't have to go further than that because that's what they're comfortable with and I'll seem more human.
Interesting. It's funny that you said that because a part of what I'm very interested in general is authentic connection. We were talking about it before we even started recording about both living in LA and like the piece that felt bad was like having to connect without, and it felt inauthentic.
It could definitely.
And that felt icky, right? And I same idea, different version. I work with women who are trying to do this as well. And I love ChatGPT. Like I love ChatGPT. I'm a big fan of it to help you do things, not to do it for you, but to help you do things. And I started because I also dated a lot. Like I dated half a Manhattan at some point, right? Like I got divorced and just was like, I want to find out what different men are and how they function and everything else. I enjoyed it because I like talking to people and I like asking questions, but not everybody does. So at some point I was like, you know what? So I created these 3 different ChatGPT scripts that are based on what you just said, which are based on what little information you have, who you are now, like you write who you are now, and then you have ChatGPT figure out how to link them so that you can find that common ground. But what I didn't realize was, which I think is brilliant, it's like those are the things that people are comfortable with putting out in public.
Yes.
And that is such an important piece of it, I think, because you're right. Then you're actually asking them what they want to talk about.
And what they're comfortable. So on the Women's Thrive community that you and I are both a part of, and we're having that summit in March, what I'll actually be talking about is this idea of how to use your story in business. Because I'm so, I don't know if sick's the right word. I'm heart sick for a lot of people who haven't had training, but keep hearing, use your story, use your story, use your story. And I agree, because what I keep asking is like, let's bring it down to humanity. But no, you're not supposed to walk into a business meeting the first time you meet somebody and like spew your backstory on the table and expect that it will just be well received.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yes.
And so it should be, what are we learning from these experiences? What did I gain from these experiences that allows me to be the best business partner for you, the best client for you, the best, whatever it is you're trying to sell or be with. Yes. You should be using it to position you into your power, but just going up and just trauma dumping on the table isn't positioning you into your power. And by no means am I saying lie. I'm just saying there's no reason you have to go in and just fully overshare these situations. They also don't want you to either, because it's a business meeting.
Right,
So
right.
it's finding that window of, I'm human. If you saw me outside of this situation, I wouldn't be a robot. We'd have fun, but let's get to the point.
Right. Which goes back to what you said about trust.
Yes.
And I want you to talk a little more about it, actually, because is it trust in yourself? Is it trust in the other person? And I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. Is it trust in the creating the trust between each other? What is it? Maybe it's all three.
I think
Probably
it's all three. I do. I think it's all three. And it's so interesting that you would separate them, because I don't know that I've ever had anybody ask me that before, but I think I'm going to say yes, it's all three.
Okay.
So I think first, of course, you have money on the table. So you're coming into a business environment. And so in any interaction, you're talking about either one or both parties going to be committing assets to this relationship. And you always want to trust that those assets are going to be either at least well used or even grow. So trust with money is huge.
Yes.
And so if you don't bring that trust in, a lot of people are already going to have their guard up even more because money is involved. It's kind of like having your heart involved, right? Like in a romantic situation, you're so much more easy to trust a friend who you're like, yeah, well, I could call you every 3 months and whatever. Or somebody you're going to like try to spend your life with, or somebody you're going to spend money with. So that's why I think trust can first off just not be there initially. But there's so much misinformation. The World Wide Web is out there. It's got all of this stuff. And so it's hard for us to sometimes know when we're like, I'm not an authority on this. That's why I brought you. But I do still want to trust that you are going to lead me in the right direction, that you're not going to hoodwink me or shift to this in some way. And so I think that's from the owner standpoint or the business standpoint. They're looking for somebody that they can know is using their credibility and authority in the right way that will be beneficial to them.
Right.
I think on the other end, if you're coming in and you're the speaker, so to speak, it's not really the job of them to like do anything necessarily. But if you walk in and you don't trust them and it's a bad feeling and you put out things to try to like break down those walls and you're not getting anything, you should maybe red flag that for yourself a little bit. Like, it's not always about them. You should be like, okay, well, I did my testers. I put my trust testers out there and they gave me nothing back.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not who you want to partner with, but that maybe you need a little more time or whatever.
Or maybe I very much go by if someone tells you who they are, trust them. Like,
exactly.
Listen.
Trust them.
Someone who tells you who they are, listen. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think the final piece of it, bridging, is most situations, the initial meeting means we will go down this road further. And the idea that, especially depending on what it is in terms of like a business relationship, the idea that you guys will always be copacetic about every opportunity going forward is probably pretty naive.
Yes.
Even in the best of situations, you'll have a disagreement on some execution point. And if you have worked early on to build a level of trust that as the speaker in the situation, I am coming with authenticity and credibility, and I want you to trust that I have your best interests at heart. And then these people over here are saying, we see your authenticity, we see your credibility, and we trust you to make the right decisions for us, that when you get to these pressure points, you guys can kind of fall back on that trust and work through it. But if that trust is really shaky and not there, it's going to implode. And so I think that's why trust is also a big deal. Is it's never going to be perfect. You're going to have to work through things, and you have to with trust.
Interesting. It's funny. This really is a revelation around relationships in general. I mean, it's this is the dynamic of any friendship, romantic relationship, mentor, student relationship. Like, that through line is consistent, I think, with every relationship that you develop that is solid, ultimately.
100%. Right? And I think a lot of this I learned because of studying like the human condition, so to speak, in acting. And then as I taught for 12 years, the past 12 years as students, I would just be regurgitating stuff without kind of thinking about it,
Mhm.
from like working on a character, working on the piece, working on the relationships. And I started to just remember how the reason for all that work was because you wanted to make real humans on stage or real relationships. And so you were relying on how humans actually behave and how relationships work. And then I finally just realized, like, oh yeah, it's all the same. It's
Yeah.
all the same.
Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? For people who are not on stage, but just trying to network or trying to get out of their comfort zone or trying to meet a mom trying to meet another mom
Gosh, yeah.
at the parent association, which has its own kind of just its own pressures and stuff. These are pretty amazing tips. Like, and I don't want to call them tips because I feel like that almost demeans what they are, but they are. Like, they are fundamentally what you're going for every time you walk into a relationship you are trying to develop, regardless of what you need from it.
Mm-hmm. And
Wow.
I think tips are a good way to put it, because the idea is remembering them in the moment, right? These little things to try to keep in mind. It's not something that you can go book learn and then go test on. The test is actually walking into a room that's super uncomfortable for you and executing and kind of noting to yourself what's working, what's not working, and adjusting in the moment, and then trying again. And the only way, it's like the idea that like you can't get more patience without like being frustrated. Like you can't learn to be more patient
Yeah, yeah.
with yourself in situations that make you want to scream. Um, I think unfortunately, public speaking, whether it's on a stage or in a room with people that you don't know, the only way to get better at it is because you can stand in your room all day long and practice that speech to perfection.
Yep.
But if nobody's hearing it, it's going to be totally different once you walk
Yeah.
in. So you
Interesting.
have to
Yeah.
put yourself in that position.
That's right. That's right. Oh, God, thank you. This is really huge. It's a huge dynamic of understanding in general. I mean, you could do it in any relationship at all, but also really like it's a big feat. I mean, I had stage fright myself and I was a professional, but I had an acting teacher who was really judgmental, and it was not the right place. And my gut didn't tell me that. And well, my gut told me something else. And it took a long time to get out of it. But like, if you're stuck in that in general, just from a small experience, even, it's very hard. So I feel like you are doing good work, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah. I really want people to feel empowered to use their voice, whether it's on a stage, in a room, whatever it is. The idea that we would already shut down our voice before we even spoke words and got reactions is just really sad to me. I'm not perfect. I've probably put my foot in my mouth 8 million times,
Of course.
but I won't let it stop me from probably putting my foot in my mouth the next time. But like the idea that you have to just keep trying. And I think you just said something that so many people don't understand. You said, I was a professional performer and I had stage fright. And that is just so true. The amount of actors that I knew that were puking backstage. I had a student that was on the national stage 3 years in a row, and he puked, and nobody else would know.
Yeah.
He didn't even know. He literally would always tell me,
Aw.
well, he would be like, oh, whenever we're out traveling, my stomach always hurts. It's when I'm eating. And it wasn't until years later I was like, no, it wasn't, you
Yeah.
goofball. You
Right.
were so nervous. You were puking. And they were like, oh, yeah, that probably was it. And I was like, yeah, that was it. But, I started carrying Tums for them. I was like, I know it's going to happen. But it's because, kind of circling back to what we talked about before, the stage fright isn't about the actual stage.
Yeah.
It's not about the like act of walking out there. It's
Yeah.
what you're scared is going to happen, or you're scared is going to mean about you if you get out there and you flub.
Right. Right. Ugh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. So where do people find you so that they can meet you and maybe get better at this and help them get better at this?
Yeah, I can work one-on-one. I can work with groups. I've done all of it, any age. I've worked with kids, adults, anything. I have a company called Parlay Communicators, And my website is parlay-communicators.com. It's also on LinkedIn. You can find that company, or you can find my name, Devin Sarno, on just about every social media platform. If you come, you reach out to me on any of those platforms and ask for it, say memory. I will send you a little tool on how to reduce some anxiety in the moment before you even start really working on your public speaking skills, because sometimes it's even hard to start. So I'd be happy to send you a free resource to lower anxiety.
Amazing. I will be sending you something with memory. It's, as you said,
Yeah.
we all get it.
Yes. I'm never not, like, there are times when I'm even nervous because maybe I haven't prepared as much, or the audience means more to me or something. I married my two friends and I was there in Colorado. We call it a celebrant. And I think it's the best.
Mhm.
I was their
I love that.
celebrant. And that was probably the most nervous I had been on stage in years and years. It mattered to me. I didn't care about the audience. I didn't care about the audience. I cared about those two people and that they felt like their wedding was special and reflected them. So yeah, it happens.
Interesting. Yeah, I can, for sure, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me. It really was
Thank you
lovely.
for having me. I love chatting with you.
Yeah, me too. And I'm so excited to be participating in the Women Thrive Summit in March.
Yes, I cannot wait. You should all join
Yes,
us. It'll be the most amazing collection of women.
absolutely. We've gotten an incredible preview. So,
Yes.
aha. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please hit subscribe. You can also find me at carolpodell.com, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Carol Podell. You can watch this at She Takes the Lead podcast on YouTube. If you'd like to keep in touch, go to my website. I've got a few things I'd love to send you. In the meantime, mwah.